We're going on assignment with the Voice of America.
Hello everybody, thanks for joining us on assignment. I'm Alex Villarreal.
And I'm Iran Siddiqui. Coming up, Iran has agreed to world powers' demands to monitor its nuclear program, but will the deal stick?
In Ukraine, protests and political turmoil. We'll talk to VOA's Moscow correspondent.
Then it's Happy Birthday English to Africa. The VOA service turns 50.
And we'll take a look back at our profile of one of that service's most successful programs, Music Time in Africa.
It's time to go on assignment, so let's go.
It finally happened. After nearly a decade of dispute, Iranian and international negotiators agreed on the first steps toward limiting Iran's nuclear program. In exchange, the world will ease the economic sanctions crippling the country.
The accord was reached after 4 days of negotiations in Geneva, where VOA senior correspondent Al Passon monitored the process. On assignment's Martin Seacrest caught up with him to get the inside story.
Let's talk about the agreement itself. Now, this is, as I understand it, is a two-part agreement, at least at the beginning. What is in this first part? What does Iran need to do?
Well, Iran needs to do quite a lot, actually. They need to stop enriching uranium to 20% purity. That's close to weapons grade. It's a short jump from there to the purity that you need to make a nuclear weapon. And they need to dilute or otherwise convert the 20% enriched uranium that they have to a lower level of purity, and they need to allow intrusive inspections to prove it, and they need to freeze various other aspects of their nuclear program, including, importantly, the construction of a heavy water reactor that would otherwise have come online early to mid next year. And the reason that's important is that once it comes online, it can't be hit by a military strike because there would be a release of radioactive material. In return, the international community is easing a few of the, what I would call, more peripheral type of sanctions. The impact of the sanctions on ordinary Iranians is believed to be what propelled the relatively moderate candidate Hassan Rouhani to the presidency in last May's election, making this accord possible. The former British ambassador to Iran, Richard Dalton, believes Iranian officials, including the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, have made a strategic decision to do what's necessary to put the nuclear dispute and the economic sanctions behind them.
They will not be saying to themselves, we just have to sit this one out and we will emerge with an economy that can trade with the rest of the world freely. I believe they will go all out in this 6-month period to achieve a comprehensive agreement.
Al, you were in Geneva when this agreement finally was hammered out in the early hours of the morning. Talk about what happened there.
Well, it was really a unique experience in my career. We were there Friday night until about 2 o'clock in the morning anticipating an agreement. There was none. We came back on Sunday to the press center. And finally, at about 2:40 or so in the morning, the photographers and video cameramen got a notification to be across the road at the UN at 3:15 in the morning, Sunday morning. And that's when we knew shortly after that the Twitter announcements started to come. And we knew that there was an agreement. And so you had a situation where the diplomats had to do their most difficult work, hammering out those final clauses, final compromises after midnight. A key dispute that delayed the accord was over Iran's claim to a right to enrich uranium, which the United States says does not exist for any country. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif spoke passionately about the right to enrich, but his phrasing indicated the agreement recognizes Iran's program, but not any right.
Iran's self-proclaimed right to enrich uranium. Iran has talked a lot about that. What does that mean to Iran?
The question of whether this right exists is based on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which says all countries have the right to peaceful uses of nuclear energy. You can't do that without having enriched uranium, whether you enrich it or someone else enriches it and you buy it. So many countries, not just Iran, believe that this sort of a right to enrich is part and parcel of the non-proliferation treaty, whether it's exactly expressed or not. The West has a different view. They say, yes, you have the right to peaceful uses of nuclear power, but you don't have a quote-unquote right to enrich. So they finessed that in this agreement.
Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu has called this agreement an historic mistake. What is the regional reaction, aside from Israel, to this agreement?
Well, there's a lot of skepticism, and Prime Minister Netanyahu certainly, I suppose, probably at the top of the list of skeptics, but I think there are a lot of skeptics among Gulf Arab leaders. And I think there are probably some skeptics in the U.S. government and in the other governments that negotiated the deal. This is a let's see how it goes. President Obama himself said that it was worth testing the intentions of the new Iranian government, so let's test it. And that's what this is. It's a test, and we'll see how it goes.
And again, that was VOA's Al Pessin in London. Now, observers say this agreement with Iran may affect more than just the nuclear issue. They say it could make it more likely for Iran to join talks on Syria, where Tehran is, of course, a major player.
We're taking a break now. On the other side, the brewing political unrest in Ukraine. You're watching On Assignment.
We turn now to Ukraine, where thousands of people took to the streets after President Viktor Yanukovych refused to sign a free trade pact with the European Union.
The demonstrations have been growing since November 21st, when the Ukrainian president backed out of the EU deal. He said Ukraine needs to continue its close ties with Russia, which opposes closer Ukraine-EU relations.
We are joined now by VOA correspondent Jim Brook, who is in the Ukrainian capital. Now, Jim, let's take this from the beginning. What is at the heart of this trade issue, and why are people so upset?
Well, polls show the majority of Ukrainians look west. It's much more attractive. It's an open society of law, and frankly, they're turned off by Putin's Russia. Now, there is a minority that would like to do a deal with Russia. So there are two competing trade groups. There's the European Union to the west and Putin's sort of Soviet light, the Eurasian Customs Union. But the polls show that people want to go west.
Right. Now, describe the scene to us outside what you've been seeing as you've been there in the capital.
Right. You might hear in the background the huge demonstration. There are about 10,000 people massed on the square directly below my hotel room. And people are here for the long haul. They brought in wood. They're cooking food on fires and camp kitchens. They've got insulated tents. They've actually barricaded themselves behind steel barricades with barbed wire. So they are camped here in the core of the city of Kyiv and say they will not be moved until there's a political resolution to this.
Now, Jim, we've watched this become one of the most serious political confrontations in Ukraine in nearly a decade. The protesters are also asking for the president's impeachment. Is there more than just the EU deal that's driving this?
Well, people have been very frustrated with the president's, the allegations of corruptions that swirl around him. His son, who's a trained dentist, is reputed to already become a billionaire in 2 years. They're not seeing the development. They're not seeing the rule of law. They're seeing the only way for young people to get ahead is to move to the European Union and work as taxi drivers or something. And they want to have development here. So the youth is driving this, and parents of young people, they're frustrated and they want to change. And the current President Yanukovych, it's just more of the same as buddy-buddy and corruption and lack of the rule of law.
Now, Jim, another thing that's become an issue here has been the Ukrainian response, the police response to the protests. We saw the international community coming out expressing concerns about excessive police force. What have you yourself witnessed?
Well, you see these lines of very tough, beefy riot police. What happened in the early morning hours of last Saturday was they swept through this square below me and basically just attacked everybody, whacking everybody, men, women, children, and that really outraged people. They could get away with this 10 years ago, but now everybody's got a mobile phone, everyone's filming this, and a very net-savvy guy posted the videos, and within 12 hours he'd gotten 800,000 hits on his videos. people were outraged, and the next day there was a 1 million person march right through the center of Kiev. So the administration here played by the old rules, which is basically attack people under the cover of night, beat them up, and no one will know the difference. Well, that doesn't work anymore. Now, what happened on Sunday night was even worse, in that there seemed to be provocations and violence on both sides. And by the end of the weekend, 43 reporters had been beaten up. People were showing press passes and getting a billy club on the head. It was really quite violent in the attacks on cameramen, photographers, and reporters.
Wow. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out there. VOA Moscow correspondent Jim Brook in Kiev. We're taking another break. Coming up, a look at 50 years of VOA English broadcasting to Africa. You're watching On Assignment.
Half a century ago, on August 4th, 1963, the Voice of America began broadcasting to the African continent. The service began as a result of efforts by U.S. broadcasting pioneer Edward R. Murrow, who was then the director of this agency.
That's incredible. Now 50 years old, the English to Africa service covers news of the continent from top to bottom. And On Assignment's Lisa Vora sat down to talk about that effort and the service's history with English to Africa director Sonia Lawrence-Green.
For years, this was a booming economic center until
marathon races during the year. Thanks to you all.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCall.
English to Africa started 50 years ago in 1963. It started as a very small service within the English division, and initially it focused on things like USA information and cultural goals. But we've grown into a really diverse and robust news service where we provide breaking news, feature and discussion programs about continental issues and also about issues within the world.
People are free to choose who they want to govern them.
This time How many different shows do you have now between radio and television?
We have 16 different programs that we produce every single week. We have now an audience of over 25 million people across the continent, radio, television, and on the internet. So what we do is we look at everything from what's happening politically, culturally, socially, economically. We do special segments on health, technology, sports.
I'm VOA's Sonny Young, and that's the sunny side of sports. Back to you, Vincent.
How do you think English to Africa is important for VOA's mission?
English to Africa is really critical for VOA's mission. VOA is providing comprehensive, balanced, important news and information to parts of the world where consumers may not have ready access to it. And while much of Africa has changed in the last few decades, there's a lot more democracy, and people are beginning to have more access to privately run media stations and improved state-run media. There are still pockets and corners where VOA may be the only source of information or news that provides all aspects to a story.
How has the media landscape changed in Africa with the introduction of cell phones, internet?
The media landscape in Africa has changed dramatically in the last 10, 15, 20 years. First of all, there are more private actors in the media market. There are bloggers now and other social media personalities that are out there on the media. So it's been a great thing for audience interaction. We've been able to get comments instantaneously into our shows. It used to be just call in, but now we can get Twitter, Facebook questions. People can email us, text us, and so we like to have that conversation with our audience in Africa.
Give us some examples of some of your reporting in the last year of global significance.
So there have been many breaking stories, and we cover all 54 countries in Africa, north, south, east, and west. For instance, a recent story was this terrible assault on the Westgate Mall in Nairobi. English to Africa's team was on it. We had reporters on the ground.
This is a community center about 300 meters from the site of the Westgate Mall.
I think it's great that we have so many reporters all over Africa. What countries do we have them, and how did that kind of grow over the years?
So it's very important to us that we cover Africa from the African perspective. And that means having reporters in all corners of the continent, north, south, east, west, central, etc. So we do have bureaus. VOA has bureaus, 4 of them on the continent, and then we employ stringers, which are reporters, who can cover stories in between.
And tell me how you pick your stories daily.
Well, that's a good question. We have a great team of managing editors and executive producers that every morning come in very early. They've been watching the wires. They've been listening to our stringers, our reporters on the ground. They touch base with our bureaus. They call their sources, and they begin to formulate an idea of what is it that's that's important that day, what's happening. We also add in features, and we add in music and sports and technology and health reports and news and a variety of subjects.
You target the younger audience over there as well.
Yes, we have programs that specifically focus on the youth. We have a show called Upfront, which is very interactive, is co-hosted in Washington and on the continent.
50 years, you just celebrated your party. It was a great party, especially the candy. Everyone was talking about it.
And the cakes.
Yes, cake and candy. Tell me just about this party. Who are any of your special guests that day?
So we had a very special guest, Leo Sarkisian, who is 92 years old.
He's adorable.
He is fantastic. And he has been with our Voice of America since the beginning. Leo started what continues to be the longest running radio program in all of VOA. It's called Music Time in Africa. And it's a lovely program that's heard on weekends. And we now have a new host, Heather Maxwell, who is fantastic. She's an ethnomusicologist and a musician herself. And she inherited the show from Leo, and the two of them have worked very closely on the transition, and she's just doing a great job. Music Time continues on into the future as a wonderful program.
And our thanks again to VOA English to Africa Director Sonia Lawrence Green. Now, in that segment that we just saw, Sonia talked with Lisa about some of the many VOA shows that go to Africa. And in the 1960s, VOA's longest running program went on the air, Music Time in Africa.
Heather Maxwell is the current host of the Pan-African Music Program, and on assignments, Rebecca Ward caught up with her to talk about the show and its legacy.
Hello, Africa. Makati. Welcome.
It's Music Time in Africa.
Welcome to Music Time in Africa, Cabo.
Oh.
So Heather, you have probably one of the coolest jobs here at the Voice of America. You are an ethnomusicologist. Did I say that correct?
That's it.
So tell me a little bit about the show, Music Time in Africa.
Yes, the show, it's a 60-minute music show that features music from all over the continent and the diaspora. And it also features music of all genres and all generations.
And it's a very popular form of music nowadays. And probably when you were in university, African music was not as prevalent on the radios here in the United States as it is today.
That's true. But the world is smaller now, and we have access to music from all over the world now. But one of the things I like the most about Music Time in Africa is that it's African music for Africans. And I also feature live music that comes into VOA. The most recent one was a group called Tartit, and they are a 5-member band, 4 are women and 1 man, and they're from northern Mali. They're Tuaregs, and they play really traditional music. But it was great because they are very traditional, and they all sat on the floor, and I sat on the floor, and they have to take water and pour it on the drums every 5 minutes or so to pull the skins down, and so that was really awesome. The one the week before was Oliver Mutukudzi from Zimbabwe.
I'll play Matisika.
Matisika. And he came in and we chatted for a good half an hour, and he talked about his music and Zimbabwe and his recent album and the theme of that album, which was sad because he lost his son, and it was about how to deal with loss, especially of a child.
When you perform this, do you feel close to your son?
Yeah, it is really, because when I play songs from there, it reminds me, it soothes me.
The week before that, it was an Ethio-acoustic soul group, a young group of Ethiopian and German pair, and they were doing really contemporary pop music.
Once upon a time, long ago, some legendary Africans I know.
The radio show is for an African audience, but you probably have fans worldwide. They don't have to tune into a television or radio station to see what you've done. You can actually see it on the VOA website.
Oh yeah, you can go straight to the VOA website, listen to the radio show, and watch the blog.
Hey everybody, are you ready for a great show?
So the program's been around since 1965.
Yeah.
But how many changes, and what changes have you brought? Have there been many changes since
Well,
then?
there's been a lot of changes. Number one, it used to be a 30-minute show, and when it started in '65, Africans in say one country didn't ever have the opportunity to hear music of Africans in another region, let alone another country. Before, the music was more traditional, and now it's more contemporary. I mean, the world music is just, there's just much more to cover. But I guess probably the biggest change is the communication. I mean, now, instead of writing letters and we receive fan mail, we're using social media a lot more. So I'm on Twitter. I have a Facebook page with where I can put links to the shows. And Africans who have access to internet get on and they tell me, hey, Heather, we want to hear this song. Can you play this? Or will you give a shout out to my cousin in this place and that place? And so we communicate a lot more now through social networking, even though we also still use telephone and still some letters. Old snail mail does come through.
All right, always good to hear from our Music Time in Africa host, Heather Maxwell. Now, if you'd like to hear the show for yourself, you can check it out on our website, voanews.com, along with Heather's blog, African Music Treasures.
And now staying on my favorite topic, which is of course music. The music known as the blues emerged a century ago from African American communities in America's Deep South, from the Mississippi River Delta and the fields of East Texas.
People of all ages love the blues, and VOA's Greg Flakes spent some time with two artists making their mark on the blues scene in Houston. Take a look and listen.
One of the most popular young blues artists in Houston is Josh Davidson, known as the Mighty Orc. He views this American-born music as a national treasure.
It's awesome, man. It's a beautiful thing, It's something to be celebrated and enjoyed.
He's learned the styles of famous blues singers like B.B. King, Muddy Waters, and the city's most celebrated bluesman, the late Sam Lightnin' Hopkins, the icon of the Houston Blues Society.
I think the real magic of blues music is that it speaks to everyone. It really speaks to, it just speaks to the humanity of everybody.
That's because the blues flows from deep human emotions, according to another of Houston's popular young blues artists, Anika Chambers.
It takes over you in different, it can take over you in different ways. So whatever, the blues is something that you just feel deep down in your soul.
Anika Chambers, who experiments with her hairstyles and dress as much as music, likes to hang out with other Houston blues songsters, including the Mighty Orc. Both of them praised Houston's supportive blues community, consisting of musicians, fans, radio program hosts, and club owners who frequently stage blues concerts.
And there's just a sense of community and camaraderie that is really wonderful, and then you have venues in different parts of the city that are sort of hubs for the community and for the musicians.
Both the Mighty Orc and Anika Chambers have recorded CDs that are helping to spread the news about Houston's rich blues heritage. Greg Flakes, VOA News, Houston.
Such great music, but we, I think, are getting ready to sing a bit of the blues ourselves because our show is coming to an end.
Yeah, it's time to go, but cheer up because we're coming back again next week with a brand new show.
Yeah, we'll be talking with our West Africa correspondent about her recent coverage of the Nigerian militant group Boko Haram.
We'll also take a look at efforts to stem the tide of polio in the Middle East.
To watch any episode of On Assignment, just go to voanews.com or look us up on Facebook or YouTube.
Thank you so much for watching. On behalf of everyone at On Assignment, so long.